The central argument of your book, your manifesto, is very simple. Break it down for us.
So it is for during from 1916 to about 1970, something called the Great Migration in America occurred. Before that, 90% of all Black people lived in the southern states of the United States. During the Great Migration, millions of them moved from the rural South to cities in the North and West. Part of that was to escape white terror in the South, also to leaving behind a collapsing cotton economy. And the pull was greater economic opportunity. Factories in the North were sending recruiters to recruit them, and also there was more freedom. I argue that the benefits of that have reached a point of diminishing returns, and it is best for Black people to reverse that migration, moving back to the South, consolidate the power they would have had if they hadn't left. They were the majorities of the population at the end of the American Civil War in 3 southern states. They were near majority in 3 other southern states, and they were a large percentage of every southern state. And if they had not moved, they would have tremendous power in the U.S. Political system.
So, what is the devil you know? What is the devil?
The devil in that sentence is racism. It comes from a sentence in the book where I say, during the Great Migration, Black people traded the devil they knew for the devil they didn't, only coming to the painful realization that the devil was the devil, that racism was ubiquitous in this country. There was no place to go and escape it, and that it was not necessarily geography dependent, but it was scale and proximity dependent. As soon as you introduce large numbers of Black people into the population of the North and West, they begin to act in exactly the same way that the American South had acted toward Black people.
So, is racism inevitable?
It shouldn't be inevitable, but it has been a fixture and legacy in this country and in other countries around the world.
So, is this just about the maths, about the numbers, that the way to fight white supremacy is for Black people to migrate in such numbers that white people are no longer supreme in certain areas?
Absolutely, and particularly in America, where it's called the United States of America for a reason, because half of the power in the United States governmental system is reserved for the states. In fact, our Constitution says every power not specifically given to the federal government is reserved for the states. And so states in our country have tremendous power. Elections are regulated by the states. The federal government has very little say in how we conduct our elections, who is allowed to vote, how that voting will be conducted. Mass incarceration in this country is a real big problem, but the majority of it is state and local. Only a tiny bit of it is, well, small bit amount of it is federal. There's a big discussion in this country about the criminal justice system. Most of that touches your life on the state and local level. So you can do a lot just by having control of a state.
We saw the power of Black voters in Georgia in the last election. Are we already at a kind of tipping point when it comes to those numbers?
Well, what happened in Georgia was twofold. One was incredible organizing against voter suppression by a number of groups, including the one led by Stacey Abrams, who a lot of people have heard about. But the other side of that was that the reverse migration of Black people back to the South is already happening. And so the Black population of Georgia doubled from 1990 to 2020, from about 1.7 million people to now it's 3.4 plus million people. That meant that the percentage of Black people in Georgia went from about a quarter to now it is a third. And they were the majority of the coalition that elected those 2 Democratic senators and flipped this state from Republican to Democrat. It shows the power of reverse migration, that even when you have yet to reach your 50% mark, you can still be transformative, because just by increasing the sheer percentage that you are in the population, you can transform the politics of the state and therefore of the nation.
But if this is all about the numbers, isn't the reverse migration going to affect the numbers in those states in the north and decrease the power of votes in the north?
Well, the one thing that is important for me to always make clear is that when I say Black power, it is not a political party's power. I am not saying Black power to help Democrats. I'm saying Black power to put pressure on all parties in the system to have better outcomes for Black people. That said, um, if Hillary Clinton in 2016 had won the southern states that she won in the primaries, those with those large percentages of Black people, she could have literally lost every single state in the Midwest and she still would have been elected. The thing is that places like Pennsylvania, where Black people were instrumental, but Black people are only 11% of the population in Pennsylvania. You only exist on the margins in those states. Only when white people basically split down the middle are you called in to break the tie. That's not real power, right? The power is to be able to deliver the state on your own. Because when you don't flip that state and then they go back to do their autopsy about why didn't we win, they don't worry about your concerns. After they lost those Midwestern states in 2016, for a year or two, all we heard was, how do we win back the white working class voters of the Midwest? Nobody cared about the people, that 11% in Pennsylvania.
How is this going to work in practice? I mean, you need individuals to want to go individually.
Absolutely.
So what's in it for individuals to move south?
Well, in the same way that there was a push and pull that brought people north and west out of the South, I believe that there's a push and pull doing the same now. The push is that there's hyper policing and mass incarceration disproportionately in those states. The many, if not most, of the highest profile Black Lives Matter cases have happened in the northern and western states. In addition to that, the pandemic of all things, just like the boll weevil infestation of the cotton crop, came in one season and changed the economics. The pandemic came in 1 year and changed the economics of many of those destination cities. So a city like Chicago in the second quarter of last year, when everything was shut down, the Black unemployment rate was 3 times that of a city like Atlanta, where I live now, in the South. Atlanta being a majority Black city in the South. That draw back to cities where the economy didn't collapse could be attractive. In addition, the Black middle class is thriving in many of these southern cities. Black-owned businesses are thriving in the southeast of the United States. In addition to that, there are now 1,200 majority Black cities and states in America. 90% of them are in the South.
Don't a lot of Black people who live in the North feel a great loyalty to where they live, a loyalty to sports teams and to music scenes? Won't it be hard for them to leave those places because of that loyalty?
Right. Well, first of all, that's kind of civic jingoism. That's a PR campaign. They fed you that to make you feel like you're allied with the city. But aside from that, not everyone ever migrates in any migratory movement. You're talking to the people who are most open to the concept, people who do not feel like their life is being honored and seen, that they are equal in that society, that the police are not stalking, if not hunting them. If you feel that where you are is edifying, you are economically secure, your community is being valued, stay there. If you do not, however, and you want a space where you can have real power, where white supremacy and anti-Blackness are not governing features of that government, there's an option, and this is it.
The change that you're arguing for in your book doesn't require any leadership. It comes from the bottom up. Is this an implicit or maybe explicit criticism of the civil rights movement? Are you saying that effectively it's not really working?
No, I actually think it worked incredibly well. But as Martin Luther King wrote in I think a Saturday Review or Saturday Post, I think a Saturday Review, in the months after the Watts riots in Los Angeles, that the civil rights movement had largely been a regional movement, and the benefits had been regional, that they had not extended really to the northern cities and the western cities. And that region that benefited was the South. And the South continues to benefit. That is the reason, Martin Luther King is killed in 1968. 1970, Atlanta becomes a majority Black city. 1973, it elects its first Black mayor, and they've had Black mayors ever since. And that Maynard Jackson becomes the first Black mayor of a major city in the South. Since then, if you look around today, almost every major city in the South has a Black mayor. That is what that is the success of the civil rights movement. It's just that it was regional.
Mm. And you, in your own life, you've moved around the country a bit. Was this a conscious, when you decided to move from New York to Atlanta, was this part of your conscious thinking?
Absolutely. I was in the middle of writing a book, and I completely believed in what I was saying. And I said, I have the luxury and the privilege to move right now, and I'm doing it.
The beginning of your book is incredibly striking. You write about the Black Lives Matter protests of this summer, and you say that they're a product of cabin fever. Like, everyone was sick of being stuck indoors because of the pandemic, and they decided to go out and have some fun. You call it social justice Coachella. Do you think that the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020 achieved anything?
I think that there are different measures of achievement. Were there individuals who experienced some sort of real conversion or education or enlightenment? Of course there were. Were the power structures that created the dynamic that allowed George Floyd to be choked to death in the street changed? Not really. That is the problem. The power didn't shift. And also, we saw an enormous surge for support for Black Lives Matter in the summer. And as soon as things started to open back up, we saw that support among white people start to drift back down to where it had been before he was killed. So it was clearly, according to the polling, episodic.
So that engagement of white people in this activism was just a temporary thing?
Well, that's what the polling suggests.
Donald Trump attracted the highest percentage of Black voters in the last 40 years. What do you make of
that? It's a baffling thing. I will say this, though. It is still relatively small compared to all other racial groups. I mean, you're still getting nearly 90% of Black people still voting for one party, which is the Democratic Party, which is still just astounding. It's just that he increased his numbers. I think sociologists will be digging into that for a long time. But it is also important to remember that he didn't increase it among Black people nearly as much as he increased it among immigrants. Mm-hmm. Hispanic people, Asian people. That actually eats into the argument of all brown, the browning of America. Because yes, it is browning, but the misconception is that all people who are not white have common interests, common policy goals, a common aim in what they want, and they simply don't. They simply don't. And you can be all be oppressed, and also within those groups have biases against other people who are not white. And so that is a very interesting dynamic that exists among minority groups in the country, and I think around the world.
Charles Blow, thank you so much for joining us on Time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.